let's look at this Fibonacci thing, just because it's just interesting. And it might just help you see how God works with regard to mathematics a bit as well. Yeah. So the number scheme is, the Fibonacci number scheme basically was discovered by an Italian man, but it's probably not discovered by him. He just probably heard it from some person in India who had some mathematical experience, and it probably wasn't discovered by him because he probably heard it from some place in Assyria that had a, you know what I mean, and it goes back for centuries, so it's not like, but it's called the Fibonacci series of numbers because the Italian man, I think it's in the 15th or 16th century, basically wrote it down and started describing it mathematically. Does that make sense? The number series is basically starts, so you just add the previous two numbers together. So the next one will be 1. 1 and 1 is, oh, you know that. Sorry. 3. Next one is 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, and of course it goes on forever. Right? That's the Fibonacci series of numbers. It's a very interesting series of numbers because at the end of it, the higher you go in the number, if you get the highest number and divide it by the next highest number, the previous number, say 89 divided by 55, you get 1.618 with a lot of decimal places afterwards. But that's around about for the 3 digits. You get that. So what? It's also interesting that if you get the lowest number in a series and divide it by the next highest number, you get 0.618. You see? That's very unusual for an irrational number. But anyway, so there you go. But so what? Right. Well, it's very interesting because these numbers appear everywhere in nature. Everywhere in nature. Now, if you're an artist, you'd probably already know that. Right? Because there is a thing called the golden ratio, or the golden rule in art, which determines how you should properly proportion your drawings, even right down to properly proportioning people when you draw people in your drawings, right? So those of you who are artists would know that. So the reason why is because if you look at the human body, so I'll draw a very poor example of the human body. Let's use my body. My body's a bit out, so because I've got a bit of development to do yet. But the height of the person, let's assume that's 1.618. Right, so my height is, I think I'm 177 or 178 centimetres, right? So my height's 178 centimetres, and if we're in proportion, then if I multiply that by 0.618, I will actually get the height from the floor to my belly button. Right? But I'll also get, if I measure my arm, right, from my shoulder joint to the tip of my fingers, assuming that's the length of my arm, 0.618 of that happens to be my elbow. Right? The same applies if I measure from my hip joint to my floor, 0.618 of that is going to be my knee. The same goes with my hands, and the same goes with my face and where my nose and my forehead appears. They're all in the same proportions. All right? Now, it's been well known for many centuries that that's the case. Right? And so many artists have, when you look at a drawing that's been done properly, like that you feel more sort of like it's more realistic, it always has those proportions. Any drawing that's out of harmony with those realisms feel like the person's disproportionate and there's something wrong with it. And in fact, it's interesting because much art that is now honoured as good art has disproportion in it, mostly because we're now attracted to disproportion more than we are to proportion due to emotional injuries. Nevertheless, these proportions exist. So this is a human body, just an example. Let's go to another example, a pine cone. In a pine cone, you'll find that if you draw a pine cone, so let's say this is a pine cone, you've got rungs that go around that way and runs that go around that way. Does that make sense? And if you count the runs that go around in one direction, you'll find that it's 8. And if you count the runs that go around in another direction, you'll find that it's 13. And there's a reason for that. The rotational angle for this number turns out to be about 137.5 degrees, and that is the best way to utilise and capture light for a multi-leaved, anything that's multiple leaved. So you will find that certain things have a 3:5 ratio, certain things have a 2:3 ratio, certain things have a 1:2 ratio, certain things have an 8:13 ratio, for example, a pine cone, certain things have a 13:21 ratio, like a pineapple is a 13:21 ratio. Does that make sense? Yeah. If you look at the head of a sunflower, you'll find that it has multiple curvatures, and they all go up higher than 55, 55, 89, or 89 and the next number, and so forth in the series. Again, the same reason being that they capture the most light, and therefore they're the most efficient. If you look at a shell, like a nautilus shell, some nautilus shells and so forth, you'll see a curvature that goes like this. Is that snail shells and so forth? Well, the reason why that is if you get a number and you make a box and you say that's 1 and that's 1.618, and you divide that into a square, you end up with another box that's 1 and that's 1.618 in ratio to that number, and so forth. And if you keep doing that, and then you draw the intersections of that, you get the curvature. Does that make sense? It's the most efficient way to use energy to create to gather resources to use energy to create, for instance, a shell, a plant, and obviously our body as well. Now, it's all through nature, right? It's also in galaxies, spiral galaxies in particular. The way the energy is distributed is exactly the same way. And it's also right down into like minute detail into not subatomic particles, but they have now found that there's some postulations that there's certain subatomic particles that have this ratio in them as well. And it wouldn't surprise me. So why have we included that in permanence? Well, there's a number of things it does for us, actually. It means that we can have a lot of different fields of inquiry and end up finding out the same thing. So, for example, you can be an artist and end up finding out about it. You could be a botanist and end up finding out about it. You could be someone who does cosmology and end up finding out about it. So you end up finding out about this one thing through lots and lots of different fields of endeavours, because this is a permanent part of natural structure. It's not the only natural structures, of course, but it is one that appears many, many times in nature. Does that make sense? Now, it's interesting you never really taught that at school, right? Well, why is that? You know what I think it is? Because it would make you start wondering how that could have occurred. Now, evolutionists would try to tell you that occurred because spontaneously through some chance. I suggest to you that creating a number system and an irrational fraction system that is based on chance is, totally crazy, actually. It's a totally crazy suggestion. The chance of it happening just for that one system and then applying it to all these different things that are all so-called evolved in different ways, even though they suggest came from one source, is pretty crazy, actually, as an idea or concept. It indicates a huge amount of design. And if you just throw things up in the air and let them fall on the ground, I'm pretty sure they're not going to end up like that, with design. They'll end up as in random orders. Right? Now, you know how they're starting to look at fractals and stuff like that now, and other systems that they've started to discover. These mathematical systems are all present in nature, from very simple ones like this one, right the way to very complex ones, right? That they're only just starting to even discover the mathematical formula for. Now, if we as intelligent beings have taken many thousands of years to discover a mathematical formula that now appears in nature, doesn't that tell you that whoever affected nature must have some intelligence? Of course it does. Right? But we ignore that, thinking that we want to believe that it all came about by chance. And we have a lot of emotional reasons why we want to believe that. Yeah. Many of which are religious, actually. And a kickback against religion. Now, I can understand people having a kickback against religion. The reality is that most religions, or pretty much all religions that I see, are basically just a whole heap of somebody's ideas all put together in writing, and a lot of the ideas seem to come out of, like, I don't know. If you were polite, you could say it might come out of their backside, but, but they seem to have come for no reason. Do you know what I mean? It's just something that they wanted to dream up and imagine. Now, of course, that's not how God is. And so people say to me, oh, but you're talking about God, so are you religious? And I go, no. What do you mean? I'm not religious. Like, God's a scientific fact. To me, talking about God's a science, not a religion. Right? Religion is just a whole conundrum of ideas that in the end somebody imagined into being. That's all it is. And that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about God. So people keep accusing myself and Mary of starting a new religion. We go, what's this new religion thing? There's no such thing as a new religion here, because God's truth is the truth of the universe. It's scientific fact. It's not a religion. So stop getting hung up on the religion thing and start seeing God's existence as a scientific fact, the mathematics involved behind it, scientific fact, all the laws involved behind it, all scientific facts. So, I can't see how it's a religion. It's not something that I dreamed up. If you want to make something that I dreamed up, I would have come up with something probably completely different. And I would have been wrong. Right? Once you see what God has done, you definitely don't want to create a religion, because there's all this scientific fact that is the fact of the universe. Why would you want to put it in some kind of religious format? You wouldn't. It is just the factual part of the universe we live in.